welcome. We will call to order the November 13th regular meeting of Aspen Pitkin County Housing Authority. First item on the agenda is roll call.
Ward Howenstein.
Present.
Carson.
Here.
Francie.
Here.
John Doyle.
Here.
Peter Grenny.
Here.
Kelly.
Hi, I'm here. Thank you.
Peter's not here, he's there.
Yeah.
I'm also there.
How's your child, Kelly?
He's getting better. He'll go to school tomorrow, but he needed to stay home today.
I have a grandson that's less than a week old.
Oh, wow.
And he was just given a name.
What is it?
Wilder Graham Warner.
That's my grandson's name, Wilder.
Really?
Yes. Is that a family name for you?
Not on our side.
That's amazing. There aren't very many Wilders. I'll be darned.
I asked if he's wilder than the mother or the father.
Well, my Wilder is often called Wild Man.
So congratulations, Ward. Okay, I don't have any agenda amendments. We'll go to public comment. Anyone like to make public comment? Either online or in person. If you're online and you would like to make public comment, please unmute yourself. Okay, hearing none, we will close public comment and go to Board of Directors comments, and we'll start with Kelly.
None that I can think of except to thank the public for supporting the county's 1A, ballot issue 1A, the new housing tax. And we will be presented with some ideas from staff next week about our 5-year budgeting plan for that. And so more to come.
Great.
Thanks, Kelly. Peter?
No comments today, but thank you.
John?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that last night at Aspen City Council, we passed a motion to keep the lumberyard project going forward and on track.
Great. Francie?
Well, I was going to say the same thing as Kelly, how exciting it is that we passed 1A. Now we can be viable partners to do housing projects.
Ward?
I celebrate Francie Jacober's reelection.
Thank you.
I celebrate 1A passing. I also celebrate 1C, but that doesn't have anything to do with APCHA. And not only did we keep the lumberyard project going forward, but we approved the budget request for APCHA at the budget last night.
Yes, we did.
Great. And then for me, I'll just echo the comments that have already been made. Kelly, I see you've got your hand up.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I just wanted to say that the BOCC interviewed 2 candidates for the community position on the APCHA board last week. I was at a conference in Denver, but I did watch the interviews, and I think we're waiting to understand where the city is at in their process, and we'll be talking about our recommendation in the coming weeks.
We did those interviews last night, same 2 people. We're fortunate to have 2 people that are so qualified and willing to serve. We have not discussed yet which of the 2 candidates or applicants we're going to recommend, but whichever one it is, we're fortunate to have people with those qualifications.
Yeah.
Well, Greg had I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say it was clear that both of those candidates had studied what APCHA is and what it does and a little bit of the history, and I thought that was pretty amazing, really.
They were amazing. And Greg had recommended we increase the size of the board by 1 so we could have them both.
I was going to say, whichever one doesn't get picked, find somewhere else for the other, because, I mean, they were both I watched the city council interviews, and
Yeah, they're both amazing.
it
Yeah.
was impressive. Okay, no other comments for me. We'll move to executive director's comments. Matthew.
Good evening, everyone. Matthew Gillen, Executive Director of APCHA. I have a few things to mention. First thing I wanted to just mention, right at the back of your packet, I just did an information memo, and it's kind of a mea culpa, because at the last board meeting, several board members referenced that the qualification requirement for self-employed individual to change recently. That is not correct. I should have taken the opportunity to correct you at the time. Instead, I referred you to the regulation. So I just wanted to make that clear that the regulations have not changed recently. About a year ago, we put in examples of more documents that might be required for self-employed people, but the actual requirements have not changed. So just wanted to apologize for not correcting you at the time. The tax transcripts are live. That is going ahead now. So all applicants now have to get that third-party tax transcript, which has been a board priority throughout the years. So we're very excited that is happening now. We had a last-minute request from 3 more HOAs to do the capital reserve studies, and we had some available money, so we went ahead and did that. So RD3 is complying, analyzing the reports, including these new ones. So we'll be getting back to you as soon as we have that.
How many does that?
That brings us, we had, on the flip side, we had a couple HOAs who said they wanted to do it. In the end, they didn't. So it's 26 was the total.
And how many do we think we have total?
Depending how you do it, because we not, if you include the single family HOAs, which isn't really the same thing, it's about 70.
Okay.
But of kind of the condo ones, it's more like 50. It's more like 50.
Okay.
Is that correct? Yeah. So somewhere around half of the condo style HOAs.
Okay. Great. Peter, did you have something on that?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for that update. Do you have an idea why the other half have chosen not to participate, and what's the timing of the of the final report?
RD3 is working. You know, they haven't given us a date, but they're on it, and Liz has been in touch with them repeatedly. So you know, hopefully by the end of the year. Just tell me and I'll say it again.
Yeah, because there are so many HOAs, it's going to take some time, especially now that they just finished 3 additional ones. Like, I would say even like early spring.
Okay.
They'll be doing first outreach, and then then I think it'll still be some time before it's actually talking to like boards about them too. Because first it'll be touching base with the individual HOAs.
So Peter, I'm not sure if you heard that, but probably actually in the spring, because it's actually very complicated, and there'll be some touch points with the HOAs as well. But we're on it, and we're getting them to do it quickly.
I just have one comment, further comment to make, and this is probably directed more at city council members, but my understanding is that there's no allocation or forecasting in the city's budget for what the city will ultimately do, I guess, to help those HOAs. And I know it's kind of, we're not there yet in terms of the discovery, but I wonder if this board would make a recommendation that the city or the county considers allocating in their next budget review monies for that, because we know there's going to be some amount of help required.
Yeah, Peter, I think that's a philosophical question. You know, the people that have been diligent about keeping their cap reserves and keeping their HOA dues at a level that they need to be, they're going to be, in essence, they'll be penalized if somebody that, an HOA that hasn't been cognizant of what their needs are, hasn't been keeping their dues increasing to cover what their repairs are going to be. So it's a philosophical question for me: is why should we reward an HOA for not taking care of their cap reserves?
I completely agree with you, Ward. It was my impression when there was like a joint meeting between the city and county. It was over at the Institute maybe 2-3 years ago, and they talked about the last time this reserve study was done. I don't know if it was 2010 or 12, and it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 million that the HOAs were underfunded. Don't quote me on that, but it seemed like a number that was so overwhelming that the only option was for those HOAs to look to the city or county to help them out and to maintain the quality of and condition of the housing stock.
You know, I think, Peter, that's the sustainability of the asset is really what we're talking about. And we've talked about it for years, and years before I was on this board, about some way having subsidized repairs and maintenance available, whether it's through approved contractors, through actually having staff that does it. But and we're talking about it tonight in the resale, the standards for resale units. But it really comes down to, you buy at a subsidized price, and when you need repairs, you're paying full market value. And so people don't do it because it's too expensive. So that's, I have heartburn about just saying, well, here's $4 million because your HOA hasn't been keeping up with what they need to be, and go get your repairs done. I can see perhaps having extended grants or some other way to have funds go into keeping the asset sustainable, but just to be giving money to an HOA that hasn't been funding it properly that's difficult for me to swallow.
No, I 100% agree with you, Ward, but I also look at that and you kind of alluded to it, that capital maintenance, that reserves, that assessment, you're going to assess at an affordable rate, right, on a subsidized unit that you may never ever be able to assess at the actual rate that you need to assess at to take care of the overall structure. To me, that's the avalanche in this entire program today is how are we going to continue these for the next 100 years, 50 years, 30 years, whatever, pick a year. But at some point, that's where an HOA is going to need to go, and it goes to the subsidized maintenance, it goes to the subsidized approved contractor, whatever it is. How are we going to figure out how to, and then maybe they're signing a deal with the devil that says we're going to have a capital reserve study that says here's 100% of your cost. As an HOA, the expectation is you budget to reserve at least 60 or 50 or some number, and then there's a subsidy on top of that from the housing fund, because we continue to build more housing, but we've got 3,000 units that will have a real need that we should be looking to maintain, looking to preserve forever. And that goes to ownership, it goes to whatever else, but how do we come up with the right ratio to know, because we know you're paying Aspen prices for a contractor, a plumber to come to your house and do some work, or a roofer to come to your place and do some work, or a painter. So how do we figure out a way to make that piece the affordable piece, right? I mean, Peter brings a good point, and I'm 100% on board that if you've got an HOA that has completely been derelict in what they've done, we shouldn't be rewarding them. But I also look at the program. The asset we have within the program needs to be preserved. And when you're doing improvements and maintenance on the exterior of a condo association, you're not really adding value to that property. You're allowing that property to stand, and that owner's going to sell for whatever they sell for the interior. The interior. You're taking care of walls out. They got to still take care of the inside.
Yeah. When we talked about this 4 years ago, we talked about hiring somebody on staff and having that person be the person who fixes all the APCHA stuff that needs fixing. And so we did a little
Well, that could be a small
investigation.
construction company at some
Yeah.
point.
Well, it could, but because rates are so high for contractors right now and they're making so much money, even 4 years ago, there was a general response that nobody's gonna do that because unless we subsidize it. So let's say we hired, I don't know, a couple of guys, or maybe a woman, and they charge the HOA or the homeowners, depending on who it is that they're doing some work for, at a reduced rate, and then we subsidize that. So that the employee has enough money to live on, but the tenants or owners, as the case may be, can afford it. And, I don't know whether we put them on staff and pay them a good salary, or whether we reduce the rate for and subsidize it.
Ultimately, I think it leads to the emergency repairs type stuff, right? You put off your maintenance, you put off your whatever you need to do because it costs too much, and then all of a sudden, a water pipe blows or whatever it is, and then you got to take care of it.
Well, aren't there two parts of this? One is we're going to get a bill, or we're going to find out what our liability is from the deferred maintenance. It's a little concerning. We're not going to know what that liability is on the other half of the HOAs that aren't participating, and I'd be interested in learning how the consultant is going to account for that. But anyway, we're going to get a bill and see what our liability is, and we're going to have to figure out how to pay for that, or the city is going to. And then the other part of it is just going forward, how we deal with it.
Well, is it the city or the county's liability or the HOA's liability?
It's the HOA's liability, and I know that this is something that we have a group to talk about. We're waiting to get these studies back to see what direction we're gonna go. And one of the things that the people knew when we did this was if they opted in to do this, then if there was a decision on any type of help in the future, if they didn't opt in, they may not be included in on it. But again, I think we're talking about the cart before the horse. Thank you, I had to think, was that the right saying? In that we really and truly have to wait till we get these reports back for us to really decide on what's the next step is. Because we have talked about that in a couple of our groups, but we need these first.
Would you remind me, Cindy, what it is that they're going to be looking at in these studies?
The capital reserves, what they're looking at is the infrastructure of the properties. What a capital reserve study does is it looks at, like where I live, we have a parking structure. So what's been taking care of the parking structure? I also know now that because some of the properties have been around for like 30, 40 years. We have sewer systems and water lines that go up. And the city or that entity will only take care up to the lot line, and then it's the homeowners association that has to take care of everything else. And I know that that's going to start to become a concern as well. Mm-hmm. Another thing is because we live in an area with around forests, it's getting harder and harder to get insurance as well. So there's a few things out there that we know that we have to talk about, and that's one of the things that we plan on doing, and whether we can have a specific construction group. That has been an idea that's been thrown out there, but again, we need these updated reports to really find out, is it as bad as what everybody says?
I see. So they're going to look at the capital reserves of the HOAs and the required work that needs to be done on site.
Right.
Both of those.
Yes.
I respectfully disagree with you. I think that we know that we have these issues, and that we don't need to quantify from each of the HOAs. We know that Peter brings it up. Even if your HOA has been attentive, you go out to put new roofs on the buildings, and you're competing against everybody that's getting top dollar.
And we went to Steamboat and got somebody from Steamboat for ours.
Yeah, and so I think that I've visualized this for years, is that we have a city department, a county department, or a pseudo socialist. We have a streets department that takes care of all our common streets. Maybe we need to have a housing maintenance department that has licensed contractors for plumbers, electricians, that do drywall, do everything that has to be done, and all of the HOAs hire from that group, and that county and the city and APCHA jointly funded. Well, APCHA does it through the city and the county, but you know, and we're restricted on our red funds. We can't use it to buy employees. It's got to be for, you know, it's got to be directly for housing. But some way to find a way, Peter, to address that delta between what's in the cap reserves, no matter how successful and how attentive that HOA has been, when it comes time to putting a lot of money into it to maintain the sustainability of that asset, they're going to need more money if you're competing free market. So I don't think it's too early to be seriously considering going down that rabbit hole.
Well, and I think you've got to, like I said, you sign a deal with the devil, and you know that department, that group, that board is part of and has as a hammer in part of your HOA discussion on capital reserves, right? Because like I said, you're probably never going to be able to reserve enough or assess enough to stay ahead of it. So you're always going to be asking for a subsidy, but that group can't go, I'm going to cut my nut down as much as, you know, as low as I can, which happened in a couple of buildings, and now we're in a deficit on reserves, right? Now we expect 100% funding on something because owners can't assess enough.
Yeah, and the new owner comes in, pays full pop, like they're all doing, and now they're facing a $30,000 special assessment.
Yep.
Right. And Matthew, I think we took a detour before you could answer the question, but so I am curious. I mean, the Peter's question, the people that are not participating. I mean, what's the top 2 or 3 reasons why people are saying no, we don't want to participate?
They feel they're fine.
They think they're fine.
There were quite a few of them who were very comfortable with their assessment.
Okay.
And we didn't get straight answers on a lot of the other ones as well. But the main reason was we've done it, and we don't have access to their books like that. Yeah.
Cindy, and do we have access to when was it, about 2015, 14, somewhere around there, when the HOA studies was done?
2014.
14?
Yeah.
We have access to all that information?
We have all the old reports.
That was required by state law, wasn't it?
No.
No,
I thought they went out and did a whole HOA requirement after the downturn.
no.
No.
We paid for
Cindy,
a
does that-
third of it.
Does that 2014 report say what the shortfall or what the liability was?
For the ones
underfunded
that
for
did, and actually, we had a past city council person who actually put all that information together in a huge spreadsheet, which we still have, and that was Adam Frisch. And he was on our Housing Frontier group. He put that together.
What was the sort of bottom line number?
I can't remember.
Okay. 'Cause it's
We still
probably-
have it, but I can't remember
it's
what the
probably
bottom line was.
Triple today.
Right.
We had a few more HOAs that were
Assuming
involved too.
nothing has gotten worse in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Great.
Just
Yes.
the-
I was going to suggest that we put it on a future agenda to talk about hiring a contractor, an in-house contractor, that we just have one session where we talk it out and see if it makes any sense and whether that person has a staff or what we do. But, you know, obviously we can't talk about it tonight forever, but.
Right. I mean, the big question there is funding. And I mean, I think if we could put something together to propose to the city and the county, I think we should do that.
I wanted to ask a question. I think it was prompted from a newspaper article. I think Matthew we made a presentation to the city or the county on the emergency grants program or whatever. But the article alluded to HOAs, and this kind of leads to the discussion we're having right now about having that available to HOAs. And I thought that grants program.
Yeah, that was a misinterpretation
Okay.
of what I said. Yeah.
That was for inside the walls.
And that was for individuals.
Yeah.
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 And how's that going?
Great. And thanks to city and county. We've got the funding for next year, so we're working on how we want to run it for next year. So we're very excited. Yeah, all the money was allocated. The average grant was over $7,000, and the average repair was about $15,000. So we'll be do some tinkering with that and come back to you and say and look at it for next year how we want to run it.
Kelly?
Thank you. A couple comments relevant to this discussion. Regarding Peter's question about those who opted out, I imagine that we could find out some information about about permits that have been pulled for those HOAs. You know, if they've done significant work over the years, they should have pulled permits for that. So that might be one way to get at some, you know, degree of understanding of what work has been done at those properties that opted out of the study. Another thing is, I think that this could be a topic for one of the meetings that we discussed where sort of the staff is a little bit off the hook on it, and we just have kind of a roundtable conversation as opposed to them building a packet around it in as one of the monthly meetings. And then thirdly, I would remind, we've had some discussion in the past, and I would just put this in kind of the parking lot relevant to these ideas about the authority that housing authorities have to do underwriting. You know, I think it's something that we should explore under the assumption that there will not be enough cash to do grants for everything, and that if there is some underwriting opportunities for us to do for some of these HOAs and pull down funds from the state to make the pot bigger for that, that is happening in other places around the state, and we do have the authorities to do that. It would require standing up, you know, its own separate project. So those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay.
I have a couple of things.
Matthew.
Sorry. I have a couple other things. We are working very hard to get the APCHA website project started, well, basically January 2nd, as soon as we get authorization for the money. So we're getting all the contracting done now, and we'll be working on that very quickly. And then tomorrow we are doing the focus group of the retirement eligible APCHA owners to discuss with them what they'd like to see out of the program, feeding into the general discussion we've had about retirees and what they want. And we're keeping it very non-threatening. There's no pressure, nobody's making them leave, and we have an outside facilitator doing that. So we'll give you some results about that soon.
Is that open?
Not for you, Ward. We're keeping it pretty close. We don't want any fingers on the scale. We're trying to keep it very safe space.
Retirement age.
That's true. But are you an APCHA? So I told Diane yesterday that she wasn't allowed to go. So
Okay.
right, Diane. I'm not. And one other thing I just wanted to flag. I mentioned this last time. We are auditing all of the Smuggler Park properties, and there's been considerable pushback from the owners who say we don't have authority to do that. We do, and we are gently telling them that. But if you hear any complaints, that's what that is. The Smuggler Park owners have a very different deed restriction, but we're making sure that they are living there 6 months and a day as part of their deed restriction, and some of them have not been happy about that. So I just wanted to
So you're
flag
auditing for compliance, kind of?
that. Yeah.
Do they have to be employed as well?
No. That's purely a I live here situation. Okay, and I believe that's it. Thank you.
Will the results of that audit be public?
I mean, they'll be public in as much as you could Cora it, but we're not planning on publishing it, no. And we have had a Cora request on it this week already, but no, we're not planning on publishing that.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Cindy?
I don't believe we have any new ownership up for right now, but we do have some rentals. I think we have 6 or 7 available. So please go on our website and look to see if you're if you're in need of a rental situation. Go on our website and you can see what type of units we have available right now, because we have quite a few right now.
They closed last week.
Okay, it did? Okay. Okay. But again, keep looking at that website, because it's just, you might, and also if you've already signed up for it, sometimes it takes us a couple of weeks, even a month, to get through that list. So because we look at it, but with the person with the longest work history. So please don't necessarily give up if you haven't heard from us within the last couple of weeks. So it's still possible that we might get to that person who doesn't have a long work history with us.
Thanks.
Cindy, those are just for the APCHA managed or
Yes,
for?
they're just for the APCHA managed.
Oh, and if I could just shout out to Sean Gabbard, who's our new property manager, who's joining us. I wanted, if you wondered who that was, he's one of
Yeah, I
them.
was wondering who that was.
So Sean's doing a great job as property manager.
Yes.
One of the new hires. Thanks.
He hasn't been with us very long, but boy, he took the bull by the horn and has really getting to know what the properties are like out there.
What does that mean, he's the property manager?
He helps with leases, he walks the property, he will work on capital projects.
The APCHA managed City of Aspen owned properties.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Truscott, Marolt, Aspen Country, and Smuggler Mountain.
On an ongoing basis, or just when there's turnover? Or?
No, we have 2 full-time employees, as property managers, and then 4 maintenance positions for that.
Thank you.
In all of those other rental units that are under different ownership and management, are there links on the website to those places?
There's may not necessarily be links, but there's phone numbers and stuff like
there's
that for them.
what we call the rental guide, which has all their contact information.
But those property managers don't publish what's available.
You have to get in touch with them specifically.
That's a bummer.
Yeah. And that's all for us. Great, thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Peter's hand is up.
Oh, Peter. You're on mute.
Come on, Boomer.
Sorry about that. Related to the property management and going back to the point of the underfunded HOAs, we already have a lot of data, I assume, from managing the city owned and managed properties. So we already know what things cost to repair, and yeah, I'm just wondering that if we can figure out how affordable those repairs are, if we know what they cost from managing city properties already. And then I just wanted to bring up that there was something I've worked with on Cindy related to rent increases at Centennial Apartments that went up 8%, and just trying to understand if that was allowed or not. So I just wanted to share that because I've been working on it.
Yeah, and then Diane asked me if you brought that up, she's directly in touch with the company, and they're working on that to try and figure that out.
Yep. Peter, when you say city owned and managed, are you talking about our 505 fund, 74 units that we own for employees, or?
Oh, just Truscott, Marolt, what the city owns through 505 fund.
602.
Well, our 505 is for city employees.
They're for
Yeah,
city
know that.
employees only. We
Know
don't
that.
know any of that information because we
That's
don't
not-
manage
I
it.
thought that's what Peter was
that's
asking.
not
Yeah,
APCHA.
we don't
Okay.
manage it.
What again? Can you remind me what properties the city does manage? Truscott, Marolt.
ACI, Smuggler Mountain Apartments,
Yeah, and T1 and T2.
T1 and T2. Yeah.
There's 5 of them.
Okay. I mean, I think this topic, I mean, we've got some space. I mean, in January, or it could be first meeting in February for just for a discussion around maintenance. I think would be good.
I can't think of a better topic for a full discussion.
Yeah, I mean, just sort of an open discussion just to talk through, because I mean, clearly there's a lot of thoughts on this. Okay, so we'll keep moving. I'm going to quickly though come back to John. Did you have any comments? Board of Directors
I
comments?
just, yeah, and a couple questions. First off, there was a deed-restricted business-owned unit that was listed. Did that sell? Did that process? And I hope it went to a small business and not.
It did.
It's, yeah, it's a Hunter Creek unit. We're still working with the current owner to have him sign the
Who
contract.
won the lottery?
Aspen Country Day won the lottery.
Okay, all right. To me, that's disappointing. There should be a way to take Country Day, Ski Co, school district, a lot of these bigger employers out of
It's
that
hard
lottery.
it's hard when when
maybe
it's an
you weight the balls
employer
differently.
unit. It's hard to say, I'm sorry, you're too big.
Well, they are, 'cause they can sell fun.
There's still employees that need housing.
Country Day is not like the school district.
Well, and they were,
Well,
right, and
they were fifth, huh? So
they were
so
not
some of
number
these-
one on the list. Or, no, they were.
They were one on the list.
And that was brought up in a fire board meeting, and I poo-pooed it right away, because we can go to the taxpayers and ask for some money. Country Day can go to their donors, all, a lot of these, so
we-
only that's
Could the board
disappointing.
change that?
Well, I used to work
No.
at Country
Yeah.
Day, and I would say that it is really hard for a private school, even though it seems lush and well-funded.
They're doing it because I'm helping them do it.
Yeah, well, it is still hard for them to meet all their goals and pay equitable wages and
Sure,
house
sure.
their employees, and so,
I envision that being a restaurateur that's really, local, that's trying
We
to
kinda
get
did too,
a
but-
dentist or something like we had on the list. So anyway, that's a bummer, but, ultimately it does go to a teacher, so you're not, or a staff member, so you're not terribly disappointed. I wanted to touch on the insurance thing. The fire district is working like heck to figure out ways to help all owners, HOAs, whatever. We're doing curbside mitigation. We're doing a lot of brush clearing, whatever else. We have a nonprofit that we raised $700,000 this year to go towards chipper programs and whatever else to make defensible spaces. So you're working like heck. We're working on an insurance summit at some point coming up to get insurance executives to Aspen to see what's going on. The Pano AI cameras we have in the area makes that wildfire response quicker. That's up and down the valley today, thanks to the Aspen Fire Protection District.
that's awesome.
Can't remember why I put this there. And then I wanted to thank the Board of County Commissioners on their quick action last Wednesday in their board meeting to have the airport alignment plan, but also the Atlantic Aviation contract, and hopefully that gets signed in your second reading next week. But I wanted to reinforce, and I've spoke to all of you individually, but Atlantic has been an incredible supporter of my other board that I was on, which I was late for today, for the Flight Academy. They probably spent $600,000 in donations over the last 10 years to the Flight Academy to pay for the fuel on every plane that flies today, which allows that Flight Academy to offer flight training for greatly reduced rates to high school students. We have a great partnership with a new director from the high school that we're working to get more students involved in that. But I want to say thank you, and hopefully that contract gets done.
That was quite a day.
Yeah, well, I love that it was really wasn't on the calendar until it was on the calendar, and then you got the board, the vote happened Tuesday, and you were meeting on Wednesday.
On it,
The wheels of progress move quickly in the county sometimes.
sometimes.
Anyway, thank you, that's all I got.
It'll only be a
Alright.
decade before you see anything. Just kidding.
Great. We'll move to next. We've got the consent calendar, one item minutes of the October 2nd regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Kelly, second from John. Any discussion? If not, it's a roll call vote.
Okay. Kelly,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Ward Howenstein,
Yes.
Carson,
Yes.
and John Ward.
Yes.
Okay. All right, next item is the review, discussion on the 2025 strategic plan.
That's,
Good.
yep.
have this on, or do you want me to?
Could you? Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I can plug it in. Afternoon. I feel like I just keep seeing y'all in one meeting or another, right? Thanks for the opportunity to be here. Some of you I had the opportunity to work with probably about a year and a half ago now, when we did sort of a strategic refresh to check in and see where things were going and where you wanted to go from here. Do I need to turn this puppy on?
If it's red, it's on.
Mm-hmm.
It's red, it's on, okay.
You can email that to me, or you can join a Zoom and I can make you a co-host and you can share your screen. Which is yours?
You tell me, do I have the Zoom link? It's easier if I email it to you? All right. Then let's do that. All right. Email.
Karen, dot
B-R-O-M.
So you got your hair trimmed just in time for the warm weather?
So I am headed to Tempe for an Ironman on Sunday. So
Yeah,
I need to be
definitely.
as cool as I can be
Yeah, no
because,
kidding.
you
No hair
know,
for that.
it gets hot out there.
Well, good luck with that, John.
Yeah.
Tempe,
Thanks.
will it be like 15 here?
Yeah, it's going to be, we're starting at 48 degrees and going to 65. So it's kind of perfect
Yeah.
in many
Is
ways.
it a full Ironman?
Full Ironman.
Wow.
Yep. I've been here enough that it automatically connects, it seems.
I sent it to you as well, Karen.
You did. I
Yeah.
got yours.
Can you open it? Great, okay.
Where is it in this email you sent me?
Oh, and the attachment, I'll go.
Oh, it's
Attachment's not in there.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't come across it.
Okay, let me do it. Yeah, sorry.
Did you get the one from me?
Not yet.
Let me do it again, sorry.
It's real fast. Karen dot B-R-O-M
Okay.
K-A at aspen.gov.
Let's just make sure, but, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Just taking a look.
Well, I can get us started and we'll just catch up as we go. So really today, the focus of our time is just to give you a quick overview of the process. So my understanding in meeting with Matthew is that this is the time to begin planning for the next 5-year strategic plan for APCHA. And when I met with you all the last time, or those of you that were a part of that discussion last time, we did an overarching training on board responsibilities and how those all intersected with governance or with operational responsibilities that are done by the staff at APCHA. So what I had up on the screen, did it come through? Okay. What will pop up on the screen is just a quick revisit of those things because we're really engaging in priority number one or responsibility number one, which is setting the strategic direction on behalf of the community. So my job in this relationship is to facilitate making sure that we are following through on that process by engaging the community, gathering their feedback, and then giving you the information you need to help set a plan for the next 5 years. So that is the, has it come up for them? Okay. So the other components of that are, of course, creating the partnership with Matthew as your executive leader, making sure that we have a plan for sustainable resources, which I've already heard you talking about. So as we think about strategies that you adopt, thinking about the financial implications of those strategies and how are you going to plan to be able to meet the goals that you put forward, and then making sure that we're monitoring, evaluating, and auditing if we're actually getting to the responsibilities and the goals that the community has asked for and you all have committed to deliver as the board members. I'll keep moving. This is going to come to you anyways. When we talk about what we're doing here, it is that goal number one, which is setting the strategic direction on behalf of the community. And so the approach that we are planning to take with this is to engage the community through a series of surveys that will be facilitated out of the staff side, but we will work with a body here or a subgroup from this board to make sure we're asking the questions that you really want answers to, and then creating the most effective way to gather that information. And then it will be myself and my colleagues working to help analyze that data, bring it back to you for consideration, and then begin to shape a plan for moving forward. So you all are going to serve as sort of the windows on behalf of the community in your role as board members, but we are going to bring as much information through that window as possible so that you really understand what the community is saying is important to them from their perspective. So as with any board, your responsibility in doing this work is to enhance the community's assets and mitigate liabilities while contributing in demonstrable ways to the quality of life in the community. So lines up pretty perfectly with the conversation you were just having. How do you take the assets you have now, optimize those assets and make them the best resource for the community, while also acknowledging the liabilities that come with that in order to ensure we have a strong and thriving community. So,
right next to the magnification slider. It looks like a wine cup.
there we go.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're going to go to slide 4.
Wine cup on that.
All right. Let's go on to the next one. So when we talk about monitoring, evaluating, and auditing the work, this is really about, as we design the plan, how are we going to develop a plan where we can, in this room, be able to understand what is working, what is going well, and how we advance the strategic plan, and then where are the opportunities for us to get stronger or better, and using metrics to determine that. So when I explain to you sort of how we're going to structure the plan or the vision for structuring the plan, it is all going to be geared around making sure that those are specific, measurable, action-oriented goals and strategies that you will all be able to reflect upon and look at, in my opinion, at every board meeting as an opportunity to say this is what we said we were going to do for the community, but oftentimes for many organizations that becomes something that they look at in an intentional work session a few times a year to say, are we doing what we said we were going to do and what we sort of promised back to the community? So that is all the responsibility of the board, and then it is Matthew and his team's responsibility to then drive forward how we either make adjustments to the plan in order to meet those goals and objectives, or go back and revisit and with your support make modifications to the plan. We're going to go on to the next one. In that role, just as a quick reminder, and again, this is information we covered with you in the session we did about 1.5 years ago, is the duty of diligence, the duty of care, and duty of loyalty in the work that you do as a board. So we're just going to hold those up, and you'll notice the best practices below. The reason I like to include this is that second bullet from the bottom, the duty of inquiry and independent thought, asking questions, being thoughtful, and expressing opposing views. If a strategic planning process goes well and is facilitated well, my goal is to put ideas and options on the table based on what you hear from the community and be able to have meaningful dialogue to say, do I agree, do I disagree, and how are we going to come to consensus in a way that our board feels comfortable that it reflects the ambitions and the desires of our community, while also acknowledging that not every decision is an easy decision, and there are always facets of compromise in that process. So where we left off, and I don't know how much you have revisited this, but this will be a good opportunity. So you can go down to the next, let's skip 2 forward, is about, again, a little over 1.5 years ago, I spent a half day with all of you and the staff where you framed up, based on a survey that we did together and then a facilitated work session, sort of a framework around what is our purpose when we come together as a board and a staff to advance the work of APCHA, and what are the values that we use to guide that work. And so you'll see next to the purpose statement, or below the purpose statement, is a belief in access to affordable housing. Providing the opportunity to live where you work is essential to creating a vibrant community. So why do we come together? To foster a vibrant community through our mechanism as this board, providing access to affordable housing in the location where you work, that allows you to live where you work. And the values, these were priority values coming out of that conversation, that you wanted to focus on strengthening public trust, doing what is ethical and in the public's interest, continuing to build on transparency, communicating frequently and accurately, quality service, being respectful, friendly, timely, consistent, and proactive, accountability, promoting inventory and occupancy integrity. Heard a little bit of conversation about that in the auditing process that you continue to do. Equity, providing equal opportunity for the access through the various processes of gaining access to property opportunities. Efficiency and effectiveness, implementing state-of-the-art systems, processes, and policies. And then innovation, fostering creative solutions to whatever those challenges that you're seeking to overcome. Part of what came out of this conversation was the idea that between board and staff, that your vision was to be a trusted and valued affordable housing resource that effectively meets Pitkin County's workforce housing needs through an accessible, consistent, and quality program. So by putting this up there, this is sort of the question for you to begin to reflect on today. And again, I'm going to share this out to you if you want to go to the next slide. Your operational priorities coming out of that meeting were to focus on right-sizing, addressing capital reserves, which you've been talking about this evening, updating categories to reflect housing costs, and updating policy and process on deed restrictions and residency. So those were operational priorities, essentially those things that the staff said, this is where we're going to be focusing our energy. And my question is, for us to begin to think about as we go into this strategic planning, has that been done? Do you feel confident as a board that the staff have committed to doing that and you feel like progress has been made there? On the governance side of things, there were 3 priority areas that the board indicated at that time. The first was a clear and consistent understanding and application of the policies. At the time of that conversation, it was about making sure everyone was fully informed about how those policies were implemented and that they had a consistent understanding, and that they, as board members, you could support a consistent understanding of how those policies were implemented. And that could align with and support staff decisions, right? So that the board and the staff stayed in alignment in how you were executing on the policies that are in place. Alignment of the board and staff approach. This was quite a large conversation at the time, and this was a commitment and an effort to, if I can name it specifically, it was making sure when concerns were brought forward that an opportunity to work with staff was happening before there was a back and forth with community members bringing forth complaints, in order to support alignment and make sure everyone had accurate information. So that was something that was highlighted in your joint conversation. And then access to tools and resources to transparently communicate and champion the work of APCHA. And this was largely tied to the work that Matthew's been doing and making sure that the board members had good, accurate information about activities that are going on in the operations side. So I heard you tonight highlighting, hey, in case anyone has any questions about this, we're doing this auditing process. Keeping the board informed so that they can be prepared to answer questions as appropriate or redirect back to staff. So that was all based on this idea of a commitment between board and staff to really strengthen being a trusted, transparent, sustainable, affordable housing program. So I'm going to pause there because that's a lot of information, and I'm going to just then walk you through how we're going to move through this process and take your questions and feedback. But I would be interested, all of that I just shared, and if you look at this strategic framework, do you feel confident that what you committed to 18 months ago, some faces have changed along this process, but does this feel consistent with where you are? That these are priorities that are talked about worked at as part of your process?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak up. I mean, I think it does. You know, I mean, I think we've made some progress on right sizing, but still have work to do. I mean, you know, this is 18 months ago, and I feel like the problems just get worse.
It's hard to move that needle, right?
It's hard to move the needle.
It's figuring out how to incentivize people to right size. Oh, yeah, it's hard to move the needle. It's really what we need to do is figure out how to incentivize the people to right size, right? The people that are in a multi-bedroom unit that they don't necessarily need anymore, downsize to two bedrooms versus 4 or 3. That's probably something we got to continue to work on. Capital reserves absolutely have to continue to work on. That's probably my biggest hot button, is figuring out a way to maintain the stock.
Peter?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see number 1 and number 2 and how we're just sort of now getting there with the capital reserve study coming in the spring. But that's exciting that it's on its way. And then the right sizing group meeting tomorrow, that's going to be really interesting to hear what feedback comes of that. I think the IGA is one that I didn't, when we were doing this exercise, wasn't on my radar. And I think that one is a big one from my point of view. And then I think on the other page you had equity, and that kind of reminded me I think it's important that we think about equity across the system. And I think of affordable housing as really economic development and helping all those people. I know economic development is not a popular term and has connotations of growth, but equity for those people that are in the system between renters and owners, and then equity for those people that are haven't won the lottery, that are part of our community and working in our community, whether it's through transit or other ways. How we find equity, I guess that's outside of housing and not in our purview, but the equity one's a big one for me.
Great, thank you.
I think we've made we've certainly put effort into right sizing and cap reserves. I'd like to suss out the updating categories and to reflect housing costs. Somebody remind.
That's the affordability study.
And when are we going to see that?
Should be soon.
That Liz isn't here, so
I know we had a full work session
Yeah.
where we talked about if we're going to focus on rentals or sale units, and I think that the outcome was that mostly we're going to focus on ownership units.
I think there's a sale production component as well. We can get Liz out here next time to update us on that.
Yeah, and John, it is, I mean, and it just takes so long. Just defining, saying right sizing is, that's a year just to try to design a program, and then all of a sudden you have it as a voluntary program, and you realize how complex it is between categories, different units, existing mortgages.
Right.
I mean, there's so many barriers to gain a bedroom, and perhaps this meeting tomorrow is going to be more fruitful. But I mean, the complexity is enormous.
Well, that's where we've talked about it before, but net bedroom gain, right? And there might, this is hard for me to say, but there might be, we talked about an incentive program or something. I don't remember if Pete was here or who was here before. But to me, ultimately, that might be the way to get people to move. It's like there's a net bedroom gain component that you incentivize people, and it's a cash payment or something to, because right now, when we build a unit, when anybody, a fire district, we built a unit, it was $1 million a bed, or $1 million a unit. It wasn't quite $1 million a bedroom, but there's a cost to build these units today. Like you're seeing that with the lumber yard, right? That's a big number to build those units. So is there a way to reallocate some of those funds or those funds to get bedrooms filled by families or whatever else, and move somebody on, or move somebody to a smaller unit? Or because I hear it a lot and I've talked to teachers that live up the school district and some great housing. Man, I can't afford to move to somewhere else because
Right.
I don't have that nest egg that I should probably.
And we are going to put that on. So Ward's idea of some sort of a payment for people who are leaving the system. I mean, we are going to have that on a future agenda to talk about.
The other thing that, this is me being snarky a little bit. On a previous slide, you saw meeting the needs of Pitkin County housing or something. To me, meeting the needs, you got to define the need, and I don't think it's 100% today, but meeting the needs is a goal, or is that a statement?
I think it's an aspiration.
Yeah, that was an aspiration 18 months ago. How do we meet the workforce needs of Pitkin County, and Pitkin County representing the communities within? But so we won't stay there, because today was really just to give you an overview, but all the conversation, what I wanted to prompt in this question of how are we doing, and we'll invite staff to do this as well, is beginning to think about what you would want to ask in a survey or an outreach to the community that will help you have these conversations to inform the discussion, right? Like, what does an incentive program look like? How far would we need to go with that? But also some of the questions that you were asking earlier and just now about, are there studies that are in process that we need to have a bit of a deep dive education on before we start making commitments to a strategic plan for the next 5 years in order to be most informed in those decisions? Because what we want to do is make sure you have as much information as possible so that you're not 3 months in and you get a new report out and all of a sudden you're like, well, wait a minute, we didn't know that, and we've gone to the community and promised to do this, and the data would never support that, right? Or we don't have the support for that. So what I want to invite you to start to think about is, what is the information we're going to want to get that is maybe in development, or maybe we already have from previous work that APCHA has done on the staff side, but then also beginning to think about what would you want to ask members of the community, particularly those living in APCHA housing or seeking APCHA housing, because we'll do sort of a broad-based outreach to the community to respond to these surveys and then do the data analysis for you. So just begin to think about that. Our next steps, so we'll go 2 forward.
I just had a quick question. So
Yeah,
what's the time frame on, or maybe that's what you're getting to. There
that's
you go.
exactly where we're going.
Yeah, look at you answering my questions before I can even ask.
Yeah, right? I'm on it today.
You're on it every day, John.
I'm trying, buddy. So today was just the overview presentation. The first step in the process is in December. I haven't put specific dates on this because I'll let you guys sort of guide me in what works in your schedules, but to establish maybe a strategic planning committee, and a decision of this group would be, do you want that to be just internal to the board? Do you want certain staff on it? Do you want a combination of board staff and citizen representatives? Ideally, you're not wanting to get so big in this combination, but the idea here is they will be the folks that do those 3 bullets below. So they help make sure we're asking the right questions before we issue the survey so that people feel like their voice is heard and you're getting the information that's important. They will be a part of reviewing and refining the plan framework. So you'll get a first draft of the plan framework, and there'll be sort of a working committee to say, hey, we need more information before we bring this back to the full APCHA board for a work session. And then they will be the committee that sort of recommends, okay, we think we've heard all that we need to hear, and we want to bring it back to the APCHA board for adoption. In the process of doing this work, December, January is when we plan to do the survey, data analysis, and then reporting back to the committee. Staff team and board of directors work session in February at some point, with a plan that you would have by March a plan for the board to adopt. So it's a pretty tight timeline, but we were trying to really keep this moving forward with the group we have now who have really been involved. So that's the plan on that part.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I just want to tighten this up enough so that adoption is before the city council election in March, because I'm going to be off. John will probably get reelected in some position, but for
Probably.
for new members to come on after the election, it would be impossible to get them up to speed. So I want adoption of this
I
before
think that's
the
what the
election.
boss man told me. He said March. I just put March, but I think that is our goal, is to make sure that this is the body that gets us through this next phase. Especially since you've been looking at all the information for the past several years that would inform that direction. Is that aligned? Okay. So in the deliverable, so let's go one more forward. In the deliverable, this is something that might feel a little bit different, and I am just a little bit, I try to be flexible on it to a degree, but I do a lot of strategic planning with organizations, and a lot of times I see them become plans that we never go back and ask. So part of the reason I wanted to see is, like, could we check back on the things we did 18 months ago and you guys have stayed on track with? That's what you said you wanted to do, and it's great to hear that you have. We want to build a plan that does that going forward as well, because ideally it is a document that can be working and can guide future board meetings and discussions in an easy way. So we'll look at the purpose statement. Does that need refreshing? Does it need any changing since the last time we did that? We'll look at your current mission and vision statement and say, does it stay the same, or is that something you guys feel needs tweaking in some way? But then we'll really, and we'll also look at the 4 to 5 value statements. The part where people usually push back on me is I get stuck on, no more than 5 goals and no more than 3 strategies per goal. And that's because that's 15 things right there that you have to keep track of, and that means staff have to keep track of, you have to keep track of. But oftentimes I get, sort of a push of like, well, we also need to. So I just say that at the outset, is I'm going to try to hold you to make that a manageable tool that you can, if you chose, you can have a dashboard at every board meeting that just says, how are we progressing on this? Or every few board meetings you come back and look at. So that's going to be the piece there, and that we make them as specific and measurable as possible. That's not always as easy as it sounds, as you all know, I'm sure. But that we are able to say to the community, this is where we want to move the needle, and then that can really drive your work going forward. So that's where we're at so far in the process. The only real follow-up piece from today would be to have you all have a discussion about what you think you want that committee to look like, and that doesn't have to happen now, as much as working, and Matthew, you tell me how we want to get to that decision in terms of who we would bring together in December to start talking through a proposed set of survey questions and sort of helping inform that and who should be on there.
Yeah, I think we should do it now to come up with a committee. I could be on it. I'd like a board member or two. That would be great. And looking at Carolyn over there as well. And then we can have some meetings in December to get it going and get the surveys out as soon as possible in December and January.
Yeah.
And come back with comments for the board. Because we only have one board meeting in December, which is why I want to do it. I'd like to have some idea of that now. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'll do is work directly with you to I'm comfortable with whoever you want. I just want to make sure the board feels like they're hearing from enough people. At that first meeting when we come together, I will come with a proposed set of questions, and then we'll work those. We're going to work towards a goal of 7 to 10 questions, no more than 10 minutes of time to complete the survey. So we'll think carefully about what are the most important things we need to have, and then we'll push that out ASAP. Sound good?
Awesome.
All right. Any questions for me in the process?
Is there, what do you, Matthew?
Is there a board member or two who would like to be part of this process?
If Kelly does it, I'll do it.
Okay. And, you know, I don't think
Because
it'll
I
be-
think she'll offset me probably.
Yeah. And that would just be a couple of meetings to come up with the survey questions and set some
Did
framework.
Kelly agree to do it?
You volunteer?
She's still on mute. I'm not.
She's
I'm
shaking her
not.
head
I'm not.
profusely.
I'm not seeing her.
Oh, HOA boards are chosen.
Who's not there?
I know, I'm trying to be,
Professional.
selective about my time these days.
Or we can do
'Cause
it
it's very
internally and float it by you by email and get your comments that way. You know, I know you're all very busy.
Well, I'm not as creative as some people.
You're
so-
on a lot of boards though.
We can do it internally and then, get some feedback from you just by virtually if you prefer. Okay, let's do that.
Written comments might be the.
Okay,
Might
okay.
be just a couple of prompts and everybody can respond.
Let's do
just
that then.
Fire off an email and.
Don't you have to worry about everybody being on?
No, we just don't send them. Just
Reply.
when we reply, just reply only to Matthew.
Yeah.
Alison Bektash used to be on this board. Now she's with the county. Would she be a good asset for this?
Yeah. Good point.
We can reach out to her, yeah?
Yeah.
She has a lot of good ideas.
I'll work with anybody, so
Yeah.
I'm not particular.
If
Well,
I-
she's not
I'll
here, so
feel
let's
good about it.
appoint her.
I'd say,
You've
She's a
proven
county
that.
employee.
is that a,
You can't, I don't know, but
oh yeah, we just,
We're gonna have
she
to
is a
check,
county,
'cause she's a
Sydney
county
points out
employee.
she's actually a county employee, so.
I can ask if her time might be lent to this effort.
Okay, great.
All right.
Great.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Good
I'm
luck.
going to Newcastle.
Why?
Did you just agree, Kelly, to do it?
no.
She didn't.
Okay, just
She
making
agreed to
sure.
let Allison do it, right?
Yeah, right.
I
She's
know.
gonna see if
I
Allison.
know
Castle
how
with
busy
Tucson?
Kelly is.
But
Okay,
I'd be happy
next.
for Francie to say yes to.
No, I just got the water district thing, the river district.
I'm going to work for Francie now in Newcastle.
Neat.
All right, next item is the review of hearing officer applications.
And you'll note that my memo is extremely short because
Yep.
this is very much we will take direction from the board to reflect the board's wishes on how you want to proceed for next steps. So this is a board-led discussion. You've got the applications there from the three applicants.
My bias on this was to find a faceless Denver law firm, right, that didn't evoke emotion on either side of the aisle. I've worked with C.R.S. on tax credit housing deals and some nonprofit stuff. So I always had a good experience with them. Sounds like their fees actually for both groups are very reasonable, right?
Mhm.
These guys, C.R.S. was what, 5% over mix last fee? What was the number?
It's 175, wasn't it?
That was the second guy.
Yeah, but
It's
the Ireland. the Kudak Rock says
Who is a 444?
whatever the prior year contracted rate was, so
With an annual increase.
with an annual increase.
Yeah, which feels pretty reasonable to me because we get to kind of test drive them. And if we have any cases, they're that, I don't know. I'm on board with either one of them. What was mixed fee previous? Because in comparison to
170,
Ireland
150.
Stapleton. So Ireland Stapleton's 175 initially. So that's a pretty good fee. They wrote a pretty good packet. I'm ambivalent to either one of these two because I think they're the faceless. C.R.S. is a huge firm, so that's kind of a.
Well, he lives in Basalt now.
Well,
That's
the
this guy?
The guy
Yeah,
from
the Kutak
Thomas-
guy.
the Kutak,
Oh.
which I
Very
thought
cool.
was.
the relationship manager for overall engagement lives in Basalt.
Yeah, and I thought that was a benefit over
So he's handy.
somebody who doesn't live here. I know you want sort of invisibility, John, and I appreciate that after our previous experience, but I thought, I was really impressed by both applications, and I thought Kutak Rock being in Basalt.
Well, but
I
the
love
attorney,
his
the guy
cover
that
letter.
was gonna be working the hearing officer is an attorney, right? He's not the engagement guy.
Right.
So that's the faceless guy. I like C.R.S.
Yeah,
That's fine.
I
I've
like it
dealt
too.
with
I
them.
like the
They're
cover letter a
professional
lot.
firm.
Kelly?
Sorry, just remind me, are we selecting only one or one and a backup, from this RFP?
Previously we selected, previously we selected a primary and we selected a backup, but I don't know that we ever ended up using the backup.
Backup's gonna be used in the next week
Okay,
or
so the backup's gonna be used in the next
And
one.
that is Tom Downey.
Okay. Oh, so he's already the backup.
Right. So he's already familiar with APCHA.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with John that I think that just having somebody from outside the community that isn't involved is valuable. And just because it lets them just look at the facts of the case and removes the emotion, or perhaps it's only even perceived emotion, right? I think it is. I think there's value there.
The only thing I really highlighted on that packet was that he would be the sole attorney representing the APCHA. Under second paragraph on fee proposal, page 21 of our packet.
This is for
Tom Downey.
for Tom Downey.
Where are you?
I'm on page 21 of the packet. It's
Right.
at page
Yeah.
4 of his,
Yeah, page 21 of the packet.
yeah.
So, I mean,
So Kelly's question, I thought it was Kelly, I was trying to find the spot here, but are we looking for Tom just to fill in, or are we looking for Tom to be the only? Are we still looking at?
I'm not. I mean, this was.
Well,
I
as you
understood this to
say-
be just the hearing officer. I mean, Tom Smith would still continue.
Yeah, this, to
Yeah.
me,
So
though,
this proposal says that his proposal says he would be the only one. So
Well, is that, I want
think
to
it's
clarify
from
that
his firm.
statement. Yeah, that's what I wondered too.
It's
is
from
like,
his
will he be-
firm
We
that he
can,
would be the
you know,
only
we could have
one.
an interview process and ask them for clarification, you know, that
yeah.
And quick question, are most of these hearings done via Zoom? Because
we have done them by Zoom. Mick has done them in person, but they have been done by Zoom, and the next round will be done by Zoom. So it can be done.
okay.
it can be done, but we need better recording, because we did we had an appeal, and I went back and looked at some of the video, and it was, you couldn't understand what was being said.
Well,
Where was it done?
but Zoom would almost take care of that because you can just record the Zoom meeting,
Entire meeting.
right? And it's like right now we've got, I see this fireflies.ai.
Yeah, we're doing. I was
That-
going to say
That's doing the transcript. So, I mean, it's almost better if you do it by Zoom because you eliminate the need for the transcript, because I'm assuming you can just get a transcript right off of Zoom.
Yeah, but
And you have a video recording of the hearing.
one of
A
the,
couple of the hearings we did not use, that we've had a couple of years ago, we did not use Zoom.
yeah, this was
and
a
that's
couple of
why.
years ago.
It was on tape, and we were in the library, so we
Yeah.
had issues with regards to some of that.
Tom?
So a couple of points on the last thing you're discussing there. We have to have transcripts because if there's an appeal to court, we have to have a written transcript. Okay?
Right, but if it was over Zoom, I mean, you just have to have a transcript.
No, someone either transcribes from an audio or the combined audio video. I think the firm we have do it in Denver, I don't think it matters to them. I think they can do it either way.
Okay.
On the other point that Carson raised about Downey would be the sole attorney representing the APCHA, I don't think it's very well stated, but what he means is that he's only referring to his role as a hearing officer.
Yeah.
And I think what he's saying is that he's not going to assign any duties to an associate,
Right,
that he would do it all himself.
right.
Well,
Yeah,
but that,
Well, he'd be the only attorney, but he might use somebody else to do something.
Well, he might have an associate help him out, but he's not gonna hand a hearing officer responsibility over to somebody else in his firm. That's what he.
Yeah, I didn't read that it would be replacing you, Tom, but I did read it as he would be the way I read it was he'd be the only one that will be doing any hearings. But now
Only
what,
one,
That's
if
what I
they're
read.
hired, he'd be the only one at that firm actually conducting the hearing.
Yes.
but that at that firm would exclude Mick being a hearing officer.
I'm sorry?
If he's the only one at that firm that will be doing the doing hearings,
Right.
so it means just at that firm, does that mean that we're still open to using Mick for some of the hearings?
You have to decide on whether you
Well, no,
want
wait a
those
minute.
two people.
That's what you have to
Without Mick.
decide.
I
If
wanna,
you're gonna
I
hire
wanna move
somebody
on
else,
from Mick.
Yeah.
you can-
I would have each one, whether it's Kutak Rock, the guys as a backup, or Ireland Stapleton, maintain their backup status and hire Kutak Rock as our primary. I think, like I said, I think we need to move away from that emotional response. And I will freely say, when we hired Mick, how many years ago it was, I thought he was the ideal candidate for the position because he had such a depth of knowledge in it. But he, you know, he allows for us to have shots on bias, whatever else that we've dealt with in the past, and taking that faceless person that, or the face out of it, and taking this Denver firm and bringing it in as a hearing officer takes that emotion away.
I thought, however, the guy from Kutak Rock was saying he was the person who would be the hearing officer, and he lived in Basalt.
Yeah, that's what I read too.
I didn't read that.
I'm pretty sure that's what it said.
Yeah, he's lived in Basalt for a few years and he wants to
Oh, he's
become,
moved up to Basalt.
Yeah.
wants to become more part of the community.
So I think that's okay too, because he's not deeply entrenched in the program.
Yeah, look at page 11, that's where he
Yeah,
talks
you're right,
about.
I did see that here. I thought that was different.
And page 15, it says that discounted rate from $6.25 an hour, but it doesn't say what that rate
To-
is.
It said within 5% of what the last person
You
was, right?
propose whatever mixed rate was plus 5%,
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
and then it's
15.
an increase.
Looking right at it, I just.
Or he's matching
there it is.
mixed rate this year, and then it's a 5% increase, COLA, basically, which is reasonable to me, going up.
Okay.
I like your proposal, John, from everything
I
I
don't remember what I proposed.
Yeah, have Kutak Rock be the primary one and possibly a backup with Ireland Stapleton and then,
Or he's already okay with being the backup, right?
and not having Mick.
Tom
Snyder.
Tom Snyder's all right with being the backup?
No, I think you meant the other one.
It's Tom Downey,
Tom Downey.
the backup.
Tom Snyder was.
Too many Toms.
I know.
No, it's always been Tom Downey is the current backup.
the backup,
And he's
uh-huh.
the one that's also in your packet.
And that's
That's Ireland.
That's
That's-
Ireland Stapleton, not Mick
not to be.
Ireland.
I know when I saw this, I'm like, did Mick create a firm to get into here again? No, I
Kelly?
shouldn't say
It's a
that.
little confusing. But then again, we got John, and Ward on the board.
John Ward.
John Ward and Ward on the board.
And just to let you know, the last time you actually set up interviews,
Set up what?
interviews.
Oh,
yeah.
interviews.
I think we should bring him in and talk to him.
Yeah.
Bring these two guys in.
Okay. Kelly?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't personally want to remove Mick or, not rehire Mick at all in all of this. I think that despite some of our displeasure with some of the conduct and needing to provide that feedback, the outcomes of his arguments have been in our favor and have been a good representation of the board position, so that his work product has been how we have wanted it. And I'm just a little troubled. I guess if we were to interview, I want to understand the possibility for conducting in-person hearings. I think that I don't know. I think the reliance completely on Zoom hearings for some of these cases would be unfair to the appellant. And so that concerns me a bit.
Well, I mean, the C.R.S attorney is in Basalt, so I'm guessing that makes in-person meetings a lot more achievable, but my question is, why would a Zoom meeting be unfair?
I mean, we had an appellant who had disabilities and was an elderly person. I think assuming that their reliance on doing these over Zoom is not, ideal. And I just think that there are some folks who would rather be seen in person when they're being heard about an issue as emotional as housing. That's my concern.
Kelly,
I don't
I
think
agree
that
with you.
a
I
full
have a
reliance on Zoom is fair.
Sorry, Kelly, I didn't mean it. I agree with you. I think an in-person meeting is preferable, as a Zoom is. If you can't do it in person, Zoom is acceptable, but in person is much better, I think.
I agree with that too.
I feel that way too.
Or at the request of the appellant. If everyone's fine with Zoom, then great. But I just would like clarity on that.
That's why I brought it up in the beginning, that I was concerned that it was going to be only Zoom. I think that's a mistake, and I think we've obviously moved past that. But just being in the same room it's just more important. There's more information you can glean from being in the room, and that goes for the media as well.
And we are all very familiar with Zoom, but a lot of people are not. My brother-in-law, who lives with me, has never been on Zoom. And he looks at that and he's just like, ah! And
God
I would
bless him.
imagine that quite a few of the
Lucky
people.
guy.
No, that's probably why we're all here in the room today, right? I mean, most of
Yeah.
us, right? I'd
Good
just
point.
soon be in person
Me
at
too.
every meeting I go to, so.
I just think I agree with Kelly that it could be a disadvantage to actually quite a few of our people. And if it's their first time on Zoom, that's so awkward. And
So I think the suggestion in person at the request of the appellant, I think that's
Yeah.
totally fair.
Yeah.
so that takes out Tom Downey, I think, because he suggested all the meetings on Zoom.
Okay. So what do we want to do? So Kelly, I'm hearing you say just maintain status quo. John Ward, I'm hearing you say
I'm
Kudak-Rock.
Kudak-Rock.
I know that Mick is a lightning rod, and he gets emotional, but his commitment, his knowledge, his decisions, I think, have been upheld in the bias. I don't know, Tom Smith's on here. I don't know that it's ever been ruled that he was biased. I'm just reluctant to abandon Mick.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification on Tom Downey, he says use Zoom as much as possible, and he does say we would propose billing APCHA 25% of our hourly rate for travel time or work with the authority, or come up with an arrangement that is fair to both parties. So he's not saying only Zoom.
Thank you.
Tom?
Yeah, 2 points. First, it's correct. The observation is correct that there's never been a determination of bias by Mick in any judicial proceedings that were for the purpose of reviewing his decisions or your affirmance of his decisions. That claim has been made numerous times and rejected by the courts. And so there's, as you all know, there are some people who have the perception of that he's biased, but it's not been demonstrated to the courts. Second, if you have any uncertainty about your choice, you can always interview these candidates. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, that's what, I think we should at least interview Kudak, what's his name, Tom
Tom Snyder.
Schneider. But also, just the point of bias is, I mean, you got these attorneys in town that are gonna take these cases pro bono. You got Chad and whoever else, Gary, was it Gary Feldman doing some of these too, but is why even give them that little greasy wheel?
I kind of agree with you on the thing about Mick, and it's not against Mick, but I think his involvement in so many layers of county life, it's not just APCHA, it's so many layers, and he's just such a public figure. It doesn't sit well for me that somebody who is such a public figure is a hearing officer for people who are fighting for their homes. It just doesn't sit right for me. Nothing personal about Mick, but.
And are you talking about an appearance of a bias, even because there's certainly an appearance of bias, but as the one Tom that's here on Zoom instead of the two that we're talking about, Downey and Snyder, Smith says, the bias has not been upheld in any of the court.
No, and as he pointed out in his application, all of his decisions were in favor of APCHA, not the applicant.
I would just make the statement that Mick hasn't actually shown any bias. The bias is actually comes from the public about Mick.
Yeah, I agree with you on
Which
that.
is part of that trust thing that we've been trying so hard to.
I'd agree with that.
You agree with that?
Well, there are trust issues when there's a person that is perceived as being biased.
Right.
But really the bias is not coming from Mick, it's coming from other people's opinions of him.
Peter, you've been quiet.
I think even if Mick hasn't shown bias, it's nothing personal. I just think it's a lightning rod, and we have enough public perception issues to tackle and win over the hearts and minds of the community with APCHA that it's just a distraction, frankly, and it's not personal. I don't know what we risk, by going with these other people. They don't have the institutional knowledge and may not know the community as well, but what we're looking for is objectivity. And
really interpretation.
Not knowing
of
these
the
people,
law,
I think, is a good thing.
Deed restriction and the contract.
All these
Okay.
things are true.
Is it Downey that is our current backup? That's familiar?
Correct.
Do you have a preference between the Kutak Rock and Ireland Stapleton, Peter?
I guess Kutak Rock.
Okay.
And Stapleton is comfortable being a backup?
I guess we would have to ask.
Sounds like he already is, so.
Yeah.
I would like a pulse of even having an interview with Mick. Give him an opportunity to state his case.
Well, if we're gonna do that, we should bring in.
Well, I think it's a good idea to bring in tom-toms as well.
I think with the amount of effort he put into his application, I think he deserves at least a look. Again, everything that's been said here tonight is true, right? Nobody said anything that's false.
Okay, so then is the consensus that we want to have all three come in, or did?
I'm not a voting member, so.
Yeah, no, I think that's what we do. Can we do that in the next meeting? That's my
Yes.
thought. Sorry, Ed.
Okay, let's do that. Let's have let's have.
It's December 11th is the next
And we
meeting.
want to have all three. Do we want to pick two, or do we want to have all three?
I mean, you're right.
Well, Downey we have experience with him. Are we comfortable with him? He's never done a hearing. He went through the process and was
I
accepted
don't
previously.
remember the process the last time we did.
I wasn't part of it.
I don't think. I mean,
You did, from what Bethany told me, you did bring everybody in for an interview.
Yeah, I don't remember the
You
conversation.
know, we picked Mick the last time because, like I said, I thought he was the right choice, but he was also significantly cheaper than anybody else.
Yeah.
I think we gotta at least bring Mick in and at least Tom Schneider.
That's, that's Ireland?
That's Kutak Rock.
I'm not a voting member, but I would be uncomfortable interviewing Mick.
Kelly?
Tom Smith.
I was just gonna say, I'm not, I'm not now, nor will I at any point make a recommendation on who you pick, but, I do think interviews can be very helpful. And you get to meet somebody and understand what kind of a person they are, which you can't get from a written application. So I would recommend, 15-minute interviews. It doesn't take up that much of your time.
That was my thought too, at least have a few
So-
questions and some conversation.
Okay, so again, I mean, and I guess this question is primarily
Bring all three of them in.
bring all three.
I think we should. I mean, we know Mick, we've talked to him, we'll have the same questions, but at least we can have a consistent process.
And we get to see him in person. I mean, we just talked about how important it is to be in person, so we get a better pulse in person.
Mhm.
Okay. So we'll put that on the December meeting.
In-person interviews for all three,
Yep.
if possible. Great.
Okay.
Assuming they can all come at that time.
Right.
Yeah, I'll reach out to them.
Seller standards.
You pull up those. Pull up those slides. I'll come down here since we have some slides.
See, where's pizza?
There's no place to get pizza in this town anymore.
New York?
Matthew, thank you for the write-up on
They don't-
solar
they-
standards. It was
they-
really helpful
Yeah.
to read that.
They'd come after
we
we
would-
started
I
the
was-
meeting if they
I'm not
delivered.
reading you the memo. I've got
I'm
some
just-
slides, but it's,
Hungry.
It was very helpful.
yeah, we did want to take the opportunity to revisit seller standards to really, show what's happening in real life. We've done some brainstorming on what to do in the future, but we want to get a check from you guys on what things you'd like us to prioritize, rather than everything. There's some very big ideas in there. There's some procedural cases we're taking as well to streamline the process. So, and this is not the only time we can have this discussion, obviously. We can just do an overview right now. I did do some slides which Karen is trying to get. But I believe it was August 2021 when the current seller standards were set. They lay out what is meant to happen to get maximum sales price. The situation we're in, though, is during the sales process, APCHA is representing the buyer and the seller. And so the priority, is actually getting the sale done. So there's a lot of back and forth. Go next. Actually, that's not the first slide. Okay. Okay. So what it tends to be happening is a back and forth over price and credits to accommodate deficiencies in the seller standards, which makes the sale happen, but doesn't actually improve the condition of the property. And staff has not been found a way, a mechanism to impose that on the seller. So we want to have that discussion with you. And let's have the next slide.
Wasn't that the hardest issue because we really don't have any mechanism in a deed restriction at this
Right.
point?
Right. So that's the standards for maximum sales price. Go on. Right. And so this is what I was saying. So obviously the seller has a huge list of buyers they can go to. So if the transaction breaks down, they can go to the next person, which I don't think is really reflective of the views of the wishes of the board, that you just go down to the lowest common denominator. And we do have that. We have that responsibility to act as buyer and as a transaction broker to the buyer and the seller. Good. Next one. And next one. So as staff, we put our heads together and we've been thinking about what we can do ourselves without appealing to the board. So we are moving up the inspection to the first thing that happens before there's even a listing, so we can have that conversation with the seller about the actual state of their property. We've started doing that. To formalize it, it'll probably need a regulation amendment. And we're also looking at the overall documents, the overall packet we give to the seller when they want to sell. So right now it's a Word document which Pam has put together. I'd like to professionalize that, make it more glossy, stress to the seller of the benefits they've had from many years of owning an APCHA property. I think we can hopefully really put some informal pressure on them to understand the benefits they've had for all these years. So that's something staff's doing. And next one. And then we wanted to have a discussion, as I outlined in a bit more detail in the packet. We've been putting our heads together. Thank you. That's a good way, Joe. Some ideas to improve the product when it's to the seller. The other thing that really happens is if we had somebody say, "Hey, I want to sell my property in 2 years. Let's just get this up to snuff." That'd be great. But usually the seller says, "I want to sell this right now, as soon as possible." So, and there isn't really a way to say, you can't sell that. If they want to sell it, they have a legal right to sell it. And, and if, I don't think APCHA would have a way to say, I'm not going to act as a transaction broker for you until you bring that up. I mean, I don't think that would hold up in court. If somebody wants to sell something, they can sell it.
Couple things. What about?
Yeah, and this is why we're here, to have a session.
I mean, we're
on
doing
things.
Inspections, right?
Yeah.
So we're getting a pretty good document from
It's an excellent document.
good
and
inspector.
yeah.
That should be part of the listing, right?
Yeah.
Hey, this is for sale. This is, but shining a bigger light to the buyer on the deficiencies of the unit they're buying.
That's even
At
better
least you've
than-
got an
yeah.
educated buyer. Because, there's desperation. Buyers want to get in. They want the best unit possible. Lots of times you just go down the list. But if every buyer understands the deficiency of their unit, at least they're making an educated decision, and I'm sure they are, about that. Because we can't legally say, sorry, we can't control the sales price for the most part. We can't tell you, no, you can't sell until you do this, or this. But at least shining the light on the issue and then working. I mean, the only way we can do that is through a deed restriction, right? A legal document that somebody agrees to in the process that says, but yeah, you're getting buyers that are saddled with repairs and maintenance, and maybe I'm okay to live with this issue, and somebody else's problem 10 years from now.
All right. That inspection, if they have an HOA, does it include any evaluation of the reserves of the HOA?
I don't believe so.
It doesn't.
So I think to your point about to what we were just talking about earlier, if we came up with, in general, I think for an HOA, if you've got above, I think 80% of your anticipated future reserves, generally that's considered adequate, because you may end up with a small capital assessment, but in general you've adequately reserved. I think if there was a grading scale where we could put a number to it or a letter to it where somebody could say, 80 to 100% is an A, 70 to 80 is a B, 50 to 60 is a C, and then anything, and then you can go D, and then below 30-40% is an F, or just there has been no capital reserve. They don't even know what their reserves are. I think doing that and putting that in the listing, here is the most recent capital reserve assessment that corresponds with, they're 73% reserved. general recommendation is 80, the shortfall is, I think if you could do that, people could at least know, because I think most people don't have any, a lot of first-time home buyers aren't going to have any understanding about what that number means. They're 50% reserved. What does that even mean?
Right.
And I think if there was a way for us to just put some more education out there to say, you know, here's what you're buying, so that you're walking into it eyes wide open.
That's a great idea, Carson. Yeah.
Do we do counseling on that, like with a
We
buyer?
do, everybody has to do a home
I know
buy.
we do that, right? But I'm thinking with a buyer that sits down with a specific unit. I mean, I can remember buying my first house and getting the inspection report, and I sat with the inspector and walked through everything. He told me what he thought was critical, what wasn't critical, not a big deal. The roof's 20 years old, they last 24 years or 25 years, you might want to consider something there. At least having a counseling session with somebody that has bought and sold property more than once could be helpful for that education of that buyer, every buyer, and that might take time.
Real quick, I want to go to Tom real quick.
Just a clarification, everything that's going on with the HOA, including the covenants, their financial situation, reserves, assessments, whether they're paid or unpaid by the seller, the seller has to disclose that. It's standard procedure that it doesn't occur at the time of the listing, but after, you know, the custom is it's a provision of the standard purchase and sale contract that all that information has to be provided by the seller to the buyer.
Yeah, but there's no grading like Carson's talking about on the HOA, right? That's the same thing with loan documents. When you apply for a loan, you know, the bank for ATRQM today needs to collect
For what?
under ATRQM Dodd-Frank regulations. So they need to disclose to your borrower, hey, this is what it's going to cost in your HOA assessment. This is what your insurance is going to cost. This is what your mortgage is going to cost. So all that stuff's disclosed in that buy and sell process, but there's no grade. Everybody understands A, B, C, or D. I think you're going to get some HOAs that are pissed off when they get graded an F or some number below an A, but at least then a buyer understands that, oh, this HOA is a B grade or a C grade, and what's the issue? Maybe they ask a few more questions.
Well, but you know, as you know, in every transaction, free market or otherwise, it's typical nowadays that the buyer gets an inspection, and that inspection includes common elements. So every HOA is subject to, in every transaction that occurs within their project, they're subject to some inspector, building inspector guy telling them they've got a deficiency. Their roof needs to be fixed or something. I mean, that's the way it
that's
goes.
the question I have, though, is we're ordering the inspection. And so, but
Well,
the
that would
buyer's
be a
not
change.
sitting down with the inspector.
Right. Do we use the same inspector for?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So
We
you
can
know,
develop a
maybe
relationship. on
maybe
day one, yeah.
the way to do this would just be to have the inspector add just a section on HOA, and then the last capital reserve study was completed in 2017, never, and then have the inspector. I mean, because I think if you can put numbers to things, people will understand that. So there's 30 units. You've got a $3 million shortfall in the HOA, and then you can simply go to, you can put that on the, you could put that on the inspection to say the shortfall divided by the number of units is X, and put a dollar number to it so that people could see, hey, this is short, right, $100,000.
Great idea. Yeah.
I might, you know what I'm saying? Like,
No, I'm envisioning this guy doing it on YouTube. Doing a recorded thing for every buyer, right? So he does it one time. This is kind of out there, but he does it one time and walks through his inspection report, and it's a YouTube video or something where you got the inspection report and the YouTube, and you're walking through, here's the issue, and then so the first buyer gets it. They go to that YouTube or that download and they watch the video, hopefully. second buyer, we move past to the next buyer. This buyer gets the same information.
I mean, in that example I gave of a $3 million short, I mean, that's probably a little bit severe, but.
Ooh, I don't know.
But I mean,
$100,000 a unit.
It very,
it's
right, it
severe.
very well, what I'm saying is that, that's real. If you're buying a unit for $250 and the HOA is underfunded, even if it's $50,000
Yep.
a unit, I mean, people need to know that when they're going in.
They do get
I just have a
get
couple of
budgets.
questions.
Yeah, but they get the budget, but,
Get the
but,
budget.
but what does the budget mean? And without a reserve assessment to tell you, okay, is this property in fantastic shape and they have very few ongoing maintenance, or they minimize their dues? Like, people just, like, I remember getting the budget and looking at it and thinking, I don't know if this is good or bad. Like, I don't know.
And you're a banker,
And when it
right?
comes,
Right.
when it comes to the capital reserves, and, I mean, we can ask the person who does the inspections now. I don't think he reviews the budget or what the capital reserves are.
Let's have that
they
conversation with him and see
Yeah.
Right.
what we
Yeah,
can
I
do.
just
I mean,
don't
that
think he
is-
does
That's
that.
a great idea.
That's a very material piece
Yeah.
of buying a property that
There's a great guy that's getting sued in Arizona that I watch all the time. He's a home inspector, and he goes through these tract homes and just rips them apart.
You just watch them for fun on
Hey,
YouTube?
his name's Kai. Yeah, it's awesome.
Oh, this is the brand new houses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's your dispensary?
No, I love it. It's great. I just
Francine,
it's rabbit holes.
you had some questions?
I have a couple of questions. If somebody gets to bid on a house, they've gotten through the lottery and everything, and they read the listing, but then they go to the house and they say, oh, this is actually subpar, I don't want. Do they lose their place in the waiting line? Do
For each unit that comes up, a lottery is done. A
Yeah.
brand new lottery is done
Right.
for each unit. If they go and see it and they say this is not doable, or I don't want to move forward with this, that's all they tell us, is I don't want to move forward, and then we go to the next one on the list. They have to get into a new lottery each time, and they're not gonna be that same number. So if they're one now, they might be 25 in the next lottery.
So that really
Yes.
does increase the
Speaks to
pressure on them
having-
to grab it at the time, yeah.
It speaks to having a really clear listing
Yeah.
before somebody goes through that and loses their place.
And we
That was
do,
one
we do
question.
have an open house that people can go to. We do, we ask for people to take pictures. Some people take pictures. Some places, they are very dated. So in the inside, it has I mean, I've owned my place since 1995. I have the same oven and the same refrigerator since 1995, knock on wood. They still work.
Is that the Brady Bunch era?
Pretty much. But it just kind of depends on if anybody has done any type of upgrades as well. I mean, what we have some ideas that we can bring forward and discuss at a later time of maybe some of these units. What has to be done is, APCHA with the help of either the city or the county, we go ahead and we buy it when it's
Right.
listed.
Yeah, I
We
saw
do all
that. I
the
like
things in it, and then we sell it with those additional things added in. The biggest issue is if somebody is if somebody's buying a unit and they are given a credit, that work still has to be done.
Well, see, that's the other part. Like the credit. How do we make sure that the work gets done?
Well, for one thing, if the work didn't get done, then we take that credit and we say, you didn't do the work, you got the money, we're subtracting that out of your sales price.
But the point of that credit
yeah.
is
Yeah.
For them
do
to
the-
do
the
it.
improvement,
And
right?
the biggest issue is and a lot of times the lender will no longer give them a credit that somebody is willing to give them, because it'll only be to cover their closing costs. Well, a lot of times it's more than their closing costs are. And the thing of it is that if somebody doesn't get the funds, if we can add an additional price or something like that up front, then they get it as part of their mortgage. So you can pay that, what needs to be done over your mortgage period of time, which might be 30 years. If the what we're trying to do is where, especially the last couple of ones that we've had, the inspections have really laid out what really the most important items that need to be taken care of, and an approximate estimate value on it. Pam lets them know, she says, this is really what you really and truly need to address it now. We can add it to your sales price. So then it's a done deal and whatever. Some people just don't have the time to do that, and some people will be willing to give them a credit. We have one that was under a very, very old deed restriction up at Centennial. No, I'm not gonna do a thing. There's nothing we could make them do because they're under
Well,
a
that's where
deed
you're
restriction
shining
from
the
the late
light to the
1980s.
buyer, and
Yeah.
maybe you educate enough buyers,
Yeah.
but you know,
Or,
there's always the
or
next
the
one.
housing authority or somebody buys it, we upgrade it or whatever, and then we sell it.
I just have one more question.
Real,
if that's
real
okay.
quick, Tom, did you have, so you had your hand up?
Diane's got her hand up too.
Maybe it's not an issue for you. Francie asked a question about if somebody rejects a contract because of condition of the property or for some other related reason, do they get the next unit? Do they get some priority for the next unit? And they don't. Each lottery is for a unit, and if you think about it, you can't do it any other way, because if you start putting people in priority who win on one property, and then they can't make that deal, and then they get first in line on the next property, then all of a sudden you got a whole new system.
You got a whole
So there's no way to really change that.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
I'm gonna go in the order that I saw these. So I got Diane, Ward, Francie. Okay.
It's really short.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And
Francis
that is-
asked-
Hold on
and
just
it's
a-
for
just a
you,
second, Diane.
Carson. So how do you know if there's enough capital reserve? How does that,
So-
is that determined?
You get, that's what, so the capital reserve study is what we're paying for. And so what it is, it's an inspector that goes out and looks at the property, looks at the condition of the property and says, your roof has 5 years left.
I see, okay.
And the cost of a roof is X and you have Y and
It's
the,
not one standard.
and the delta is, right, and so then.
I understand.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay. All right, Diane?
Hey, thanks, Carson. And I'm in my car, so I don't have my video on. You all are talking about some really good market forces that you can put in place, such as transparency around capital reserves or the inspection. I think these are great ideas. There's a really fundamental thing that Matthew's explained that I just want to emphasize. The changes that you all made to the regulations in August 21 gives APCHA the teeth to be able to reduce the maximum sales price. APCHA can knock it down to cover everything in that inspection report. But the challenge of that is that just last week, Pam got an inspection on something, and the person said, look, these things that are coming up in this inspection, these were here when I bought the unit. They were a problem, right? Because the market forces in this market make people buy properties that aren't up to standard. So APCHA really wants you all to know, like, you technically have the teeth. I don't think the board wants APCHA staff going in and saying, okay, buyer, even though you bought 2 years ago, we're going to hold you financially responsible for everything that happened in your unit before. And that's the fundamental reason why Matthew has put this slide in front of you as, hey, can we find some happy medium that gets these units up to standard so when they do turn over, they are at an acceptable standard? And we're taking that, Cindy's example of, if somebody has old deed restriction, of course, there are some, not a lot, but there are some that are going to be able to say that. But for a lot of people, technically, APCHA has the authority, but we don't think that the board wants APCHA going in with a hammer like that. Thank you. Thanks for that opportunity.
Thanks, Diane. Okay, Ward and then Kelly.
Yeah, I got about a page into this this section of the memo, and I thought, and I mean this is a different approach. If our goal is to make sure that the units are up to snuff, to me it makes sense that APCHA buys the unit at the maximum sale price. We make the repairs that are necessary, and we sell it so that we know that the repairs have been done. We know that we're maintaining sustainability of the units. We're looking after the asset. It introduces some complexities, but I think this is the only way that we're going to make sure that these repairs get done. Anything shy of that, I mean, you go in and you set up, you've got all of those conditions that have to be met. You're going to put a dollar value on each one of those and then subtract that, or you get a guaranteed maximum price from a contractor to come in and fix everything. I mean, it's a real high level change in the way things are done, but to me, it makes the most sense is for APCHA to buy it. And if the maximum sale price in one of the scenarios is that, oh, I've lived in this for 17 years, I'm the original owner, well, that maximum sale price is going to be lower. So APCHA buys it as the maximum sale price, and they make the repairs, and they sell it for
Cost plus.
Yeah, well, they sell it for what the comps are in that same complex.
Well, at least cost, like purchase price plus repairs, like you recoup your costs.
Yeah, but for somebody that has been in a unit for a long time, they sell it, they're getting shortchanged. If you've turned your unit over a bunch of times, it's
Right.
worth more.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but in theory, not really.
Yeah, but in practice, yes.
No, because you're still spent, I mean, in theory, turns over 10 times, somebody's bought it, done 10% of the work, added that to the sales price, got it again, 10% of the work. So the money's been spent. Somebody that sat in a unit for 20 years and done nothing, they're selling it for their appreciation.
Yeah, which is, it's
But there's nobody's getting ahead in that.
well, the maximum sale price for somebody that's been in the unit for 20 years is a lot lower than somebody that has turned it over a bunch of times.
Yeah, but
But they
I'm
had
just
to pay
saying,
more, too. The
the
last
dollar,
buyer had to
yeah,
pay
the
more.
buyer bought it, paid the 10% more because the 10% was spent.
Yeah,
So
but
there's no gain in dollars,
but
there's just gain in price.
from a high level, to get the repairs done and the units looked after and to have a real livable, I think the solution is APCHA buys it, makes the repairs, and sells it.
That's what I
There's a
thought when
way
I
to
read
start,
this.
there is a
Tried
way
that
to
at Woody
gain
Creek.
some money into the coffers to allow more of these repairs to go forward and not have to rely so much on the city and the county. There are some units at Hunter Creek that people bought for like $75,000, $80,000. They are all category 4 at Hunter Creek. Some of the pricing for some of those units is probably under $200,000. Category 4, 2 bedrooms, quite a bit higher than that. So what you do is you fix it, and you sell it at the max category 4
Exactly.
for that unit.
Yep.
But any additional money that's over what APCHA can get to break even would go into a specific fund that's to repair units coming down the line until when you need it, because there are going to be some cases where it's going to be more than what we can sell it for. So, I mean, and I couldn't tell you how many that is or whatever, but that's kind of a way to look at it. So people can't say we're really getting a windfall because APCHA's not getting the money. It's going into that specific fund in order to buy more of these so that we can upgrade them.
But is the
before
maximum
we sell
sale
them.
price penalized if a unit is below standards?
No,
No.
can't do it.
I'm gonna go to Tom real quick. Tom, did you have something to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I hesitate because I'm out of my lane, but I have to comment on this issue that Ward has brought up because I've watched all this for decades. Ward's right. In the end, especially as these units continue to deteriorate and become more expensive in terms of repairs and maintenance, the financial realities of affordable housing are going to require the public to pay for upgrading these units to standards. It's going to happen eventually. In the meantime, I think you do need to look at some of the ideas presented by staff in their memo here. But I think everybody needs to kind of get oriented to the fact that when you look at the constraints in the resources of buyers and sellers, the uncertainties of capital reserves, the limitations on sale price, the fact that you've had lower income owners having to pay at the very high rates of people in the trades here in the Upper Valley. When you look at the whole picture, government's going to have to pay at some point. But in the meantime, something like what's in this memo has to be addressed because it's going to take a long time to get that in place.
Right.
I'm out of place, but that's what I had to say.
Thanks. Kelly?
Yeah, just to address a few things that I've heard here, probably not in logical order, but going back to something Diane said relative to owners who have taken on burden from prior owners, I think that should only be true in the first turn. So to me, we should know which units did not have these rules applicable at the point of sale and which units did. And so I don't think that should extend into the life of a unit. Anyone who is buying now is subject to these rules, and they are subject to the delivery of the unit to the next buyer. Now, I think that there can be some accommodation in that first turn on getting the unit up to standard, but I don't think that should extend on in perpetuity. So that's just one way of thinking about, I guess, a gap. I have long thought that we should be buying some of these units, particularly the ones that have not turned over many times and are priced very low compared to the category, upgrading them and then turning them over at a price higher in the category. I do think that we would rightly be criticized to keeping all of that profit for whatever purpose in properties that have very high capital reserve issues. Like I think about Hunter Creek, I think there's a good argument that maybe some of those Hunter Creek units should be priced lower because they are facing mining waste and window replacements and things that are very expensive that we have to keep that in mind a little bit. So perhaps as we think about these things, maybe some of that money goes back into a churn program for APCHA so that we can buy and repair and resell, and some of that goes into capital reserve fund for some of these properties that are facing very expensive issues that I do think are kind of above and beyond the ordinary maintenance of buildings in some cases. So I think we've had some discussion here relative to transparency of information to the buyers. Again, you can give people all the information in the world and there's still going to be buyers who are going to buy units. And there's still going to be, we're still going to see some units where a lot of the buyers pass those up. And I continue to struggle that we have some of these 3-bedroom units that are getting filled with one person because nobody else has bought them. We're just compounding other problems in the program. I would rather see APCHA hold those units and do the repairs as necessary on those specific units before we create more problems that we're trying to solve for. I also just think about some of the transparency. We can grade HOAs relative to certain criteria for sure. I don't know how that allows for HOAs who would say hey, we've participated in this assessment study. We're trying to get on good footing. We've reelected a new board. We're taking turns to taking steps to get on the right path. I think that we might need to keep that in mind. And, potentially that is through additional information on a disclosure about, well, who is your contact person at the HOA? And if a buyer wants to ask those kind of questions, they should have that direct connection to ask them. So I see some things about, information and transparency, strengthening the rules, and then having a fund to absorb some of this ourselves as 3 different pathways for us to consider. And I don't know, I guess it would help to understand from the board's perspective what I guess how they would help us prioritize that based on their bandwidth and what is lower hanging fruit. It would be helpful if there's any way to be able to look at a year or 2 period to understand what if APCHA had bought and repaired and sold, what does that fund need to look like? How much needs to be in it for it to be a healthy program to achieve that? Because I do think that would be valuable.
But where's the profit that you're talking about? The money is spent on the improvements. There's no profit.
Well, they're talking about gain, like if there's a max sales price for a category, it's 400 grand, but we buy something for 125, spend 200. Now we've spent 325, but we can sell it for 400. They're talking about, hey, let's push it to the max sales price for that category. So that's the gain. And some of them, it could be significant, but.
But I have always even if it's a perfect unit, I have long thought we should be making that adjustment anyway, because why is someone just by luck of a lottery getting into a category 3 and they're paying like category 1 prices for it based on their own income and their own, I've long thought that there are a lot of policy reasons to just make that adjustment and level the sales price up over time consistently.
My worry is you start getting into a little bit of that's where that distrust in APCHA comes in.
Well, but so I think if you do it in conjunction with an affordability study and you're setting all the prices to the same affordability standard, then it's very transparent about what you're doing. Everyone is getting right in. So, I mean, there's a lot to this because not all units are the same. And it's a very complex problem.
And in many ways we already do that because our categories are set by AMI, right? So we have already said within this income band, this is how much house you're expected to afford. So I think a lot of that is already built in. We just have not assigned our unit prices to match that.
Yeah, the byproduct of bringing them up to standard and reselling them, even if you keep some of the money to future fund, as Cindy has mentioned and Kelly's mentioned, that you're taking care of the asset. You're
Right.
Well, that's
the only thing that you're really not doing is you're not adding to the capital reserve budget itself that needs to be added
Of the HOA.
Yeah, for the HOA.
Well,
It's you're giving them a really updated unit, but it's still not adding into your
They could
the
still be
capital
hit with a
reserve
huge
fund.
Yeah,
assessment.
but
Yeah.
if we're focusing on individual
Yeah.
units here,
Yeah,
I mean,
and
folding
exactly,
in
exactly.
what Carson and
Can't do it all.
Yeah.
So-
You eat a 500-pound elephant one bite at a time.
Peter, real quick. Peter.
Yes, I agree with all the comments Ward made and Kelly and I think Tom has kind of put us on notice with this, but that we're the community, the government is going to be saddled with maintaining these units at some point, and I feel strongly we're not doing anything to quantify what that liability is as we build more units. And it just feels like our deficit is growing our liability. But the hypothetical that isn't popular to consider is just if you said all the 1,663 ownership units turned into rentals tomorrow that were managed by the city, we would have to come up with what it would cost to maintain those units and what deferred maintenance and capital improvements would be required day one. And so let's just say they're not going to become rental units, but that liability still exists out there of understanding what the deferred maintenance is to preserve the integrity of the inventory, and then what is going to be the right number of ongoing maintenance to care for those units at market rates or subsidized, city's contractor rates. I feel like we have to figure out what that is, because we don't control people maintaining their units. The only way we could control that is if they were rental units, and that's not going to happen. But that cost still exists.
And that's part of the purpose of the capital reserve studies is that we will have access to all of that information. So
we then need to assign whatever, we know what it costs to operate or maintain a unit at Truscott and various rental properties. And we're going to have to assign a larger number, obviously, to single family homes and some of these more dated condo ownership units. But we're going to have to apply a number to all 1,663 ownership units and say, that's probably the average liability of deferred maintenance that the government is going to need to cover.
So a couple of things. This goes back to what we did a couple of years ago on Woody Creek, but we have that right in the deed restriction to take ownership before it even hits the market, right?
And we've got 2 properties in Woody Creek when we're doing that right now.
And I'm 100% on board with that to take them to some level. I don't know if it's, if that hasn't turned in 10 years, maybe there's a rule we set that says if it hasn't turned in 10 years, that's one that we take and update.
Right.
The problem Kelly brought up that I think is hard to really enforce is arbitrarily picking certain subdivisions or certain properties where we're going to do a different thing. I think it has to be a consistent policy across the board of cost plus something. Maybe it's cost plus 10%. So if somebody comes in and asks, what are you doing? Well, we bought this unit for this. We spent $100,000 and we put it back on the market at our cost plus a gain over and above. I do like the idea of trying to bring it to some kind of level, but I worry if you do it and say, well, Hunter Creek's got high assessments, it's facing some other things, that, well, why didn't you do that at Burlingame? Why didn't we do that here? Why didn't we do that at, where Cindy lives or whatever else? So I think you've got to have some consistency of process to defend to everybody.
Yeah, APCHA buys all units.
Or you make some kind of policy, right?
Yeah, buys all units. And
well, we do buy all units today, but
I know for a second, yeah.
So I've heard a desire for information and transparency during the sale, to explore a fund for APCHA to make improvements, a program to explore for APCHA to own units to improve them, research on what the inspection reports say, more information on the delta between the maximum sales price and what they've actually sold for to see what that difference is. And part of that is explore leveling sales price at sale.
And they'll be ready by the meeting on the 11th?
to me
No,
that fund's
this is not- we're
probably
not bringing
$3 to
this back
$5
until
million.
next year.
Yeah.
Because you're churning money, right? So you're going to sit on something for a few months, you're gonna do some work to it, and then you're gonna put it back on the market. It's not a small dollar figure
No.
that you have to have available to
So
you.
we'll have lots more meetings on this.
Yeah.
I
mean,
we
it-
have bankers who will help.
I mean, my thought here is if we're looking at APCHA taking ownership of some of the units or doing some of the repairs, I mean, I think that's a strong case for having, a construction crew that works for APCHA that's doing it
Yep.
at cost, and, I think the goal should be try and make it revenue neutral where the program just pays for itself. And that, I think.
Or at
that-
least doesn't run in the deficit.
Or at least doesn't run at a,
I mean, it can make some money.
or maybe a very small deficit, right? I mean,
No, I think it can make
Type of
some money.
100% recovery system.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is, and
Enterprise
I
fund.
think if you're doing that, you're looking at the units and, okay, there's a sales drought where there's not a bunch of units that end up going for sale. I'm sure that there's HOAs with capital reserve deficiencies where you could put those people to work for that HOA, maybe at 50% of the market cost or whatever. But I think that there's ways to keep that crew busy, and it can be done at minimizing the taxpayer expense.
Interns. Just kidding. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Are you suggesting the way that it remains net neutral is it's recaptured in the next sales price?
Yes.
Okay, we've got a lot of food for thought. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
John, you might have been a flippant remark, but you've got CMC and Habitat for Humanity is training people in the trades. You can have fellowships or, it's a valid,
It's going to be a growth industry.
yeah.
But when you're at that level, you have to be working with somebody who has experience, so it depends on how many people we want to have. I mean,
I bet Bristol Peterson would do this for free.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, no markup at all.
Okay, well, we still have one more item on the agenda, so, Matthew, anything else from you?
No, thanks very much. We'll,
Lot said there,
yeah.
so,
Thanks.
thanks. Okay, last item on the agenda, we've got an executive session. Would somebody like to make a motion to go into
We need to.
executive session?
What?
I would if I could.
I will. I move we go into executive session.
Need to read it.
I am time limited here.
You want me to do it?
Executive session for a conference with APCHA Attorney Tom Smith for the purpose of receiving legal advice under C.R.S. Section 24-6-4024B regarding case number 2024 CV 334, Silvino versus Aspen Pitkin County Housing Authority.
A second.
Is there anyone we need to invite into this?
Tom is the only one, and is Diane, did you want to stay on this?
She's not on.
Okay.
Okay, we'll
Okay.
clear the room here as
Unless
quickly as
Stephanie doesn't want
possible and reconvene.
Is this a vote?
Yeah, oh, yes.
Sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Yes, it is a roll call
Kelly?
vote.
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
John, Ward,
Yes.
Carson?
Yes,
Ward.
Yes.
okay.
That's called the press again.